Welcome. Hello, beautiful humans. My name is Joseph Green, and I am a member of the program staff at Rise Together and co-creator of this training, along with Irina Bogolamova, the founder and CEO of Choice and Recovery. On behalf of Anthony Alvarado, co-founder and board chair at Rise Together, Nadine Miskovich, VP Operations, and all the members of our amazing board of directors, I would like to welcome you to RAISEconnection, a training for teachers, counselors, and community youth workers. In our 6 sessions together, we will enhance our ability to engage, educate, and empower the youth we serve. But before we do any of that, a word from our sponsors.
During the 2018-2019 school year, we were able to partner with over 44 different schools and get in front of over 20,000 plus students.
One of the questions we get at Rise Together is, what is the impact of your programs? Through our 4 key programs, we get to effectively engage young people through things like our Ignite and Engage seminar. In that space, they get to start a conversation, raise awareness around addiction and mental health, ask for help for the very first time, receive guidance, resources, and also take action in unique campaigns and other programs. What are those other programs? Well, we have Crave 21, for example. It's a 21-day health challenge that's gone global. They get a chance to learn healthy habits and routines through a cool mobile app and a toolkit. Not only do students get a chance to take on this challenge, but so do teachers and principals and family members. So it's a community-wide approach. And we want to continue to build that support. So now we're raising students up by teaching them how to become coaches themselves so they can help their peers navigate through life through programs like Discovery Corps. We've also had an opportunity to lift students up through our RAISE project. That RAISE project is teaching students how to share their story, how to raise awareness, and do campaigns themselves that are unique and special to their community.
The impact from our programs between our educational seminars and our student-led activities, along with our ambassador program and our coaching program, was phenomenal. We know one of the best ways to get in front of students and to truly make a difference with them is to be able to educate them through storytelling and to truly create a safe space for them to not only ask for help for the very first time, but also share their story. And that's exactly what we were able to see this last year.
Cut to camera 2. Hello, friends. I just wanted to take a moment and say, howdy. Whenever you see me in this camera, I'm talking just to you, as opposed to when I'm talking into the other camera and I'm talking to everyone. Allow me to properly introduce myself. My name is Joseph Green, and I am a faithful father, present partner, obliging offspring, contributing citizen, certified mindfulness trainer, and recent recovery coach in training. And I can be all of those things because I am a person in long-term recovery. And that is why this training is so important to me. I believe the more brave, safe spaces we create, the better chance our youth have of making healthy and positive decisions for their lives. Now, back to our regularly scheduled program. Welcome back. As I mentioned before the commercial break, Our overall objectives are that by the end of this training, participants will be able to engage, confidently facilitate group and individual conversations, focus on substance use disorder, mental health, and personal empowerment. Educate. Demonstrate how storytelling is used to build connectivity and reduce stigma around sensitive social issues. Empower. Build trusting relationships with youth and empower them to implement youth-led projects. To accomplish this, we have broken the training down into 5 video modules and 6 Zoom sessions. Module 1, Introductions and Examining Personal Biases. Module 1 introduces the course curriculum, the Rise Together team, mission, and vision, and addresses how unconscious bias can negatively impact youth development. Module 2, Mental Health and SUD Literacy, including many pathways and protective factors. Module 2 dives into the importance of language, specifically how it relates to how we talk about substance use disorders and mental health. Module 3, Creating a Brave, Safe Space and Communicating Effectively with Youth. Module 3 teaches how to create a brave, safe space which encourages and empowers youth to have difficult conversations. Module 4, Sharing Your Story. Module 4 discusses the power of storytelling as a tool to create trust and connectivity with young people. We will also write a story of triumph and overcoming so that we can lead by example. Module 5, Maintaining Motivation. Module 5 addresses maintaining motivation in youth programs through the implementation of co-created organizational and communication tools. Session 6, Conclusion. While there is no Module 6, Session 6 summarizes the training, revisits the highlights of our journey, and presents a clear path forward. That's a lot of information to cover, but please keep in mind that while you will be watching the video and completing assignments at your own pace throughout the week, that we will be meeting one evening a week to ask questions, share best practices, and network with other brave humans. So please, take your time, open your mind, lead with love, celebrate vulnerability, and be prepared to give yourself a break when you need one. I'm ready if you are. Can you smell that? That's the smell of hope. Or chicken burning. Unconscious bias. And other fun things people love talking about at work. Why start with unconscious bias? First, you should know that this training embraces tough conversations. It exists in that place outside of our comfort zone because at Rise Together, we have discovered through years of working with youth and youth workers all over the country that real change happens in those uncomfortable places. According to Charlotte Rule of Psychology Today, implicit or unconscious biases are unconscious attitudes and stereotypes that can manifest in the criminal justice system, workplace, school setting, and in the healthcare system. She goes on to say, these biases often arise as a result of trying to find patterns and navigate the overwhelming stimuli in this very complicated world. Culture, media, and upbringing can also contribute to the development of these biases. This is important to mention because conversations around bias can become blame games and often end in unnecessarily hurt feelings. This is, however, the same reason why we must face them, because knowing that you may be armed with something that could cause another person harm and doing nothing about it is a problem. While this is not an extensive bias training, it will open your mind to many different forms of bias and equip you with some tools to start or continue fighting the good fight. Most importantly, remember that most things in life worth obtaining take practice. We all fail, but we all must show ourselves and the people in our lives the grace needed to fail forward. In other words, be easy on yourself. If you have bias, then you are human. And that's a good thing because this training was made just for humans and some clever dogs. As we go through these different types of bias, please take note of any that apply to any experience you've had on either side. Pause the video at any time and jot down a few sentences about that situation. This will assist you in the exercise at the end of the section. Affinity bias. Affinity bias, also known as similarity bias, is the tendency people have to connect with others who share similar interests, experiences, and backgrounds. It is easy for those who work with youth to see themselves in the young people they work with. The affinity for familiar can cause us to extend certain kindnesses or favor towards students we identify with. On the other hand, it can, in worst case scenarios, cause us to treat students differently from us with less compassion and patience. Ways to avoid affinity bias. Actively take note of the similarities you share with the youth you serve so that you can differentiate between attributes that may cloud your judgment. It is our job to find ways for youth to embrace differences, celebrate diversity, and build bridges in order to grow community. Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the inclination to draw conclusions about a situation or person based on your personal desires, beliefs, and prejudices rather than on unbiased merit. When first meeting our youth, we can form an initial opinion of them based on inconsequential attributes like their name, where they're from, where they went to school previously, and so forth. This opinion can follow you into the classroom or after school space and consequently steer questions and interactions to confirm the initial opinion. Ways to avoid confirmation bias. When initially working with your youth, come from a place of curiosity. It is crucial to find icebreakers and warm-ups that dive below the surface and which allows them the opportunity to show who they are beyond preconceived notions either we or the world have placed on them. Attribution bias. Attribution bias is a phenomenon where you try to make sense of or judge a person's behavior based on prior observations and interactions you've had with that individual that make up your perception of them. While this may seem harmless, humans are quick to judge and falsely assume things about a person without knowing their full story. This can cause us to label youth as innately lazy or aggressive, allowing us to distance ourselves from them and what might actually be the problem. This leads to youth being overly disciplined and often surrendering to the beliefs that others have about them. Ways to avoid attribution bias. While every environment we occupy comes with its own unique set of responsibilities and goals to accomplish, these responsibilities and goals should not be at the sacrifice of youth feeling comfortable being their whole selves. Rather than assume a student is merely choosing to act a particular way, ask them what's happening. It might be easily addressed. Recommend the counselor instead of the principal, pull students aside, or keep them after class to find out what's going on alone instead of in front of the entire class. Conformity bias. Conformity bias is the tendency people have to act similar to people around them regardless of their own personal beliefs or idiosyncrasies, also known as peer pressure. This is about standing up for young people when the path may not be easy or popular. Sometimes our colleagues don't feel the same level of connection with our youth and will make recommendations you may know aren't in the young person's best interest. Ways to avoid conformity bias. It is important to follow best practices and evidence-based programs, but it is not the core of our mission. Our mission is to serve young people in order to prepare them for a world as it is, even if that path isn't popular. Keep a journal of your thoughts, ideas, feelings, and beliefs about the work you are doing. Use it as a reference point of how you felt before other parties weighed in. This isn't to say you should never change your mind. This is just a way to course correct if your spirit feels askew. The halo effect. The halo effect is the tendency people have to place another person on a pedestal after learning something impressive about them. The halo effect in youth development. Examining a young person's record before meeting them and finding out their scholastic or extracurricular achievements is completely normal. But it can lead to favorable behavior that may backfire in two ways. First, we can spoil high achievers into believing that their achievements are all that define them, causing them to crash particularly hard when they do experience failure. Secondly, it may seem to the other students that you are playing favorites, diminishing their desire to work hard. Ways to avoid the halo effect. Avoiding the halo effect doesn't mean not recognizing the achievements of your students. It does mean if you find yourself constantly calling on or assigning praise or special tasks to the same few students, then maybe it's important to diversify your standards for praise and participation. It's important for both high and underachievers to know that academic and extracurricular achievements are not the only things that lead to a meaningful life. The horns effect. The horns effect is the tendency people have to view another person negatively after learning something unpleasant or negative about them. The direct opposite of the halo effect, the horns effect, can cause us to treat youth differently based on negative marks on their records. This whole concept stands in contradiction to the idea of youth development. If all the young people we come across are already where they need to be, what purpose do we serve? Ways to avoid the horns effect. It is impossible not to judge a book by its cover. That's why books have covers. Unlike books, we don't get to leave our youth on the shelf if we find some aspect of their past or present to be distasteful. Create an overabundance of opportunity for youth to show and tell you who they are and who they desire to be. Most importantly, if you find yourself acting adversely to a young person even before they give you a reason to, ask yourself why and seek counsel from an objective peer. Sometimes we have to assist ourselves in being our youth's greatest advocates. Gender bias. Gender bias is the tendency to prefer one gender over another. Come on, it's 2020. You wish it was that simple. It is easy for anyone to fall into the trap of gender roles. Most people embrace these openly, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't question and even challenge them. In youth development, we can often assign tasks that are more administrative to those who identify themselves as female, while giving leadership roles to those that identify themselves as male. We can also throw around phrases like, girls are more sensitive than boys, or boys will be boys. These phrases can reinforce negative gender identities, insinuating that males aren't capable of or shouldn't show sensitivity, or that females should be held at a different standard of behavior because they innately have the ability to or are expected by society to control themselves. Ways to avoid gender bias. The first step is to examine our personal views on gender and investigate in what ways we reinforce those views in shared spaces. The next step is to seek more information about gender identities and gender fluidity. The more information you have, the greater sensitivity you will be able to show your youth. This isn't about changing your view of gender, though it might. It is about creating a space where all definitions are welcome and all youth feel safe. Adultism. Adultism is the last bias we are going to cover in this training session. It isn't on the list compiled by Bailey Rainers, but it is one of the most important concepts I believe educators, mentors, and parents of young people should know about. Our information here is taken from the National Conference of Community and Justice, but there's a lot of information out there about this, and I implore you to seek it out. Adultism. Behaviors and attitudes based on the assumption that adults are better than young people and entitled to act upon young people without their permission. This treatment is reinforced by social institutions, laws, customs, and attitudes. And now, it's about to get really real. Like really, really real. Discrimination. The mistreatment of an individual or group based on their social membership, regardless of their social power. Anyone can experience discrimination. From a very young age until they are 18, youth are required by law to be in school. This gives them little to no autonomy over their bodies and educational path. They are thrown into a Hunger Games-like setting where their ultimate goal is to please adults, acquire academic gratification, exist in the same world as adults while constantly being told their emotions, dreams, and relationships are less important because they are just children. Social power. Access to resources that enhance one's chances of getting what one needs to lead a comfortable, productive, and safe life. Youth have very little of this. They are subject to laws with virtually no input created by people who are sometimes decades away from their current situation. Young people are told what to learn, what to wear, and where to be, and are punished, sometimes with jail, if they dare rebel. Bear with me. This is all going to add up real soon. Privilege. Unearned access to resources, social power, that are only readily available to some people because of their social group membership. An advantage or immunity granted to or enjoyed by one societal group above and beyond the common advantage of all other groups. Privilege is often invisible to those who have it. In America, at 18, we all gain certain privileges and rights that are given to us just because we survived 18 trips around the sun. There are thousands of young people under the age of 18 that are extremely active in local and national politics, yet don't have the right to vote, even on issues that directly affect them. Oppression. When an agent group, whether knowingly or unknowingly, abuses a target group, this pervasive system is rooted historically and maintained through individual and institutional systemic discrimination, personal bias, bigotry, and social prejudice, resulting in a condition of privilege for the agent group at the expense of the target group, reinforced by law, policy, and cultural norms that allow for a differential treatment on the basis of identity. Only people, groups that do not have social power can experience oppression. Discrimination plus social power equals oppression. I told you it would add up. Get it? Add up? No? Okay. I hope the seriousness of the terminology being discussed hasn't caused you to turn off. We are not advocating for the immediate release of young people into the streets or into the halls of Congress, though they may do a better job. Science has already given us a guide to the needs of youth through their development from infancy. Understanding these needs and including youth in the design of all programs that affect their lives is vital to them feeling like respected and seen members of society. That is how we begin to defeat adultism. Here's a list of youth needs created by psychologist Erik Erikson, who lived from 1902 to 1994. He is perhaps the best known theorist in the field of human development. He proposed a model of 8 stages of development that all children grow through as they move from infant to adult. The stages are trust, which he linked to positive emotional relationships with caring adults. A strong sense of self-sufficiency. Ability to exercise initiative. Confidence in one's ability to master skills and navigate one's world. A well-informed sense of personal identity, a desire to be productive and contributing for future generations, the ability to experience true intimacy, a strong sense of personal integrity. And that concludes our long, but nowhere near complete list of biases. Thank you for rocking with me. 1. Become aware of your biases so that you can interrupt them. Before entering a conversation with a student, colleague, or parent who triggers you, Take 10 seconds, pause, ask yourself, what are my biases towards this person? How can I disrupt my autopilot thoughts so that I can genuinely see and listen to him or her? With awareness, you can replace biases with receptive listening and affirming thoughts. 2. Study and teach colleagues about implicit bias. Here are a few facts that every educator should know. Bias is a universal human condition that must be recognized and managed, not a personal defect. According to Stanford social psychologist Jennifer Eberhardt, focusing on individual acts of bias or weeding out the bad people won't solve the fundamental problem. Listening helps us take in a person's multiple stories and disrupts biased thinking. 3. Pay attention to gap closing teachers. We all know teachers who connect with and support the success of every child. Consider how those teachers manage their biases. How do they get to know their students as complex individuals? How do they build trust? What learning routines characterize their classrooms and humanize students? Through conscious reflection, you can isolate and track instructional practices that interrupt bias. 4. Stop tone policing. Blogger Maisha Johnson defines tone policing in this way. When marginalized people speak up about our struggles and people from more dominant groups focus not on what we said, but how we said it. To challenge implicit bias, we must listen to the voices of colleagues who have been underestimated or misjudged. When people of color are brave enough to name bias in schools, they hear that they're too emotional or making things up. There's nothing made up about implicit bias. Learn from those who have the courage to speak up. 5. Tune into implicit bias in your school. Ask yourself these questions. Where do I see implicit biases playing out in our school? What fear or apprehension do I have about addressing these issues? How can I be an ally to colleagues, students, and families who experience bias in our school? In a wonderful TED Talk, Verna Myers defines biases as the stories we make up about people before we know who they actually are. She asks, who do you trust? Who are you afraid of? How many authentic relationships do you have with young Black people or any other people with major differences from who you are? Knowing this, you can engineer experiences in the classroom and the staff room that build bridges and challenge misconceptions. As we conclude our first training, I want to take a moment and say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for challenging yourself. Thank you for wanting to become better at what you do. Let me reiterate that challenging bias is a practice, a journey, one in which we must give ourselves permission to fail. But we can never stop trying to create more inclusive spaces for our young people to grow. Keep in mind that nothing I said here is law, and I look forward to fielding your questions and leveraging your learned and lived experiences into best practices we can all benefit from. Now, go grade some papers or something. I hope you enjoyed that last joke. It was the best I could do. I'm very sleepy. Also, don't forget about the assignment. It's in the folder we shared. Adios.